The underbelly of this season has brought some great stories to the surface. Spider being hunted by Mara and Petra and trying to make an escape, Crow's journey to Venus, and now the sad tales of Saladin Forge. Lord Saladin has had his fair share of struggles throughout the years as an Iron Lord, and it appears these still continue after seasons unfold. Today we are going to dive through the new lore and stories involving Lord Saladin and discuss how this has impacted other major characters over various seasons, like Crow. Saladin has had a rough history. He was risen in Old Russia and was one of the first warlords who would fight over territories for power. These Risen were of course the first Guardians, but they didn't really know what to do with this power, so some were corrupt and used it to take over land. A select group of these warlords would then vouch to create the Iron Lords, a group of risen warriors who would fight off these warlords and eventually protect humanity's civilians. Saladin, through his bond though, suffered many losses. There were some of his friends at the battles like Six Fronts, known warlords, and most notably, his Iron Lord allies during the Siva conflict. Saladin would return to the tower in Destiny 2, and we heard his various warnings about the Warmind, about wielding stasis. Saladin has always been a fan of the old ways of running things. We witnessed this in Season of the Chosen, where he wanted to straight up fight the Cabal in combat rather than negotiate peace with Keitel.
There was an assassin within the walls of the last city, and no one knew until it was almost too late. Luck was on our side. Next time, it won't be. What we must do now is channel our light into a clean, burning fury and raise the Cabal Empire to ashes.
I mean, on one side, can you really blame him with everything he's been through? We can see that it's hard for Saladin to trust other characters, and he doesn't always agree with their ways of doing things. I mean, it even got to a point where we started to think that he was the one planning Zavala's assassination in Season of the Chosen, and the lore makes several cool nods to that incident. In the Iron Forerunner lore tabs, which is the new Iron Banner set, we once again see the struggles Saladin Forge has went through, but also a secret revealed to him about Crow, which may in fact change the way he thinks about certain situations, and cause him to possibly become a mentor of this character. So I'm going to read these 5 cards. The first part of each card are things that Saladin remembers from his past, and the last paragraph is how it reminds him of Crow now. So this is going to be a while, a couple of minutes. If you like to fast forward and get the analysis, you can go to this moment right here. Saladin remembers what it was like to be young. He remembers the exhilaration of discovering the infinite power he now holds in his hands. He remembers the terror too, his first death and the agony of a ruptured lung. His mouth had been too full of blood to form words or plead with his ghost, so he tried with his eyes instead. Saladin remembers his second death because it was quicker than his first, a wrong step in a minefield outside of what used to be a city called Nur Sultan. He laughed when his ghost reassembled him. Then he cried. Saladin remembers deaths 3 through 65, but does not dwell on them. Instead, he regrets the thousands of hours of sleep lost to nightmares, and how much less vibrant in his recollection of that period in his life is compared to his noble centuries spent as an Iron Lord. Saladin remembers the day he stopped counting deaths. "Something about you is different," Yolder had said, and put her hand on his. Saladin remembers all of this and more when he looks at Crow. He feels rage form from a hot pit in his belly when Osiris tells him about the young Lightbearer's suffering at the hands of his fellow Guardians. Osiris asks him if he can keep a secret. "I don't like secrets," Saladin says, and that's the end of it. Saladin remembers burying bodies by the dozens. He remembers being thankful that the ground had thawed early that year so they wouldn't have to burn them. Fires brought light and smoke brought fallen raiders. Fallen raiders brought more bodies. It's a vicious cycle, Aphrodite had said as she tied off a funeral shroud with great care. Saladin remembers the bundle being very small. One day I'm going to break it. Saladin remembers how easily the body fit in his arms, how light it felt as he laid it in the grave. He remembers, with shame, pretending not to hear Aphrodite's words so he wouldn't need to respond to them. He remembers not having anything to say. Saladin remembers all of this and more whenever the crow talks back to him. Sometimes he bites down on the inside of his cheek. Sometimes he looks up to find his ghost focused on him with a knowing look. He doesn't say anything to his ghost either. Saladin remembers losing his connection to the light. He remembers thinking that the traveler must have discovered his most secret doubts, the darkest thoughts he shared with no one, not even his ghost. He remembers the strange sense of relief that had washed over him until his radio crackled to life just moments later. He remembers hearing a voice broadcast to the world that the last city had fallen to the Cabal, but he could not tell whose voice it was, only that it wasn't Zavala's. Saladin, his ghost had said, sounding like it spoke from the end of a very long, very wide tunnel. You have to move, because Saladin stood unmoving. He remembers staring out the window at flurries of snow for what felt like a very long time, but could have only been a few minutes. He remembers tracing the outlines of neighboring peaks across the glass with the edge of his knuckle. He remembers the act of remembering. Once upon a time, he taught their names to Zavala, as their names had been taught to him. Saladin, his ghost said again, and Saladin remembers moving. He remembers clutching his radio and rallying survivors, those strong enough to make the journey, to the Iron Temple. Saladin remembers this and more whenever the crow challenges him on his cowardice during the Red War. He wants to break the young guardian's back to teach him a lesson about what it's like to feel helpless, but something stops him. He remembers hearing stories about the crow's life on the shore before he arrived at the tower, and does not raise a hand against him. Saladin remembers the simple pleasure of sharing a meal with friends. He remembers Radagast hanging the deer upside down by its hind legs, and how swiftly Perun used her knife to skin it. He remembers Yolder tending to the fire with wood cut by her favorite axe, a mighty thing fashioned from steel and embellished with engravings of laughing wolves. It had been a gift from a blacksmith whose son Yolder effortlessly plucked out of a frozen river several winters before. Putting an arrow through its heart is the easiest part, she'd teased him. Now you get to sit back and watch the rest of us do the real work. Saladin remembers helping anyway, using Yolder's axe to section off a flat piece of juniper to smoke the meat. He remembers the sound and smell of bubbling fat, and how rich the drippings had tasted when he soaked them in bread. He remembers Radagast asking him to sing the song taught to them by the people of the blacksmith's village, but agreeing only when Yolder and Perun promised to join in. Their voices rose like wolves in the night and were so raw by morning that none of them could speak. Saladin remembers all of this and more when Zavala tells him that Amanda has taken the crow out to drink in the city's streets. He wonders what song they'll sing, if it's anything like the one he's heard everyone humming lately, even though he hasn't tried it himself. Saladin remembers the first time he met Zavala. He remembers thinking that Awoken had regal bearings like the stags he once hunted on the steppes. His shoulders were broad and his chin held high. When he moved, he did so with the strength and purposeful deliberation of someone with the power to determine his own place in the world. You'll never have a son, his ghost had said, but it isn't too late for you to take an apprentice. Saladin remembers their sparring matches. He remembers how Zavala always got back to his feet no matter how many times Saladin put him down. He remembers refusing to offer the younger Lightbearer a hand up until the day Zavala finally bested him in combat. He remembers lying flat on his back, left shoulder dislocated and ribs shattered, a strange pressure on his chest that made it difficult to breathe. Finish it, Saladin had commanded because that was the way of things. His ghost would revive him. Saying nothing, Zavala hauled him to his feet instead. Saladin remembers all of this and more when his former apprentice calls him into his office and tells him about the face behind Crow's mask. Zavala knows that Saladin doesn't like secrets, that it's unfair to ask him to keep one of this magnitude. But there will come a time when Crow needs someone, the way Zavala needed Saladin. You never needed anyone, Saladin insists. Zavala only smiles. So this is pretty cool. If you don't play Iron Banner or didn't know these sets existed, you miss out on this little story. First, Saladin has had struggles which we've seen throughout these cards, having to bury bodies because of the Fallen and other alien races, his struggles with the Iron Lords, Zavala was his apprentice, and now it seems that Crow could possibly fit into that position in the future. Each of these cards at the end there, it says Saladin remembers something about Crow, that Crow was always challenging him about his cowardice during the Red War, which we saw in Season of the Chosen.
Keitel lost a lot of support agreeing to a truce.
The Cabal are not guided by reason. As far as I can tell, neither is the Vanguard. Not anymore.
From what I've heard, the Iron Lord's definition of reason hasn't exactly been a winning strategy.
I think we're done here.
At least we agree on something.
And how Saladin really connects with Crow. He wants to snap back. He says he wants to break his back to teach Crow a lesson, but he stops because he remembers what Crow has been through, and it reminds him of his own life, that Crow deserves a second chance. So this has been leading many to believe that Crow could become an apprentice of Saladin. They both have some connections in the lore as you've seen throughout these cards, and when Zavala tells Saladin who is behind the mask that is truly Aldrin Sov, he says there will be a time when Crow needs someone, like Saladin. So could that happen sometime in the future? I can definitely see it for sure. We know that Crow has had too much going on right now and that he went to Venus to sort of decompress and think about things with his current life, knowing what he does. So will Saladin find him here, or will it be somewhere else in the future? Anyway, Guardians, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you'd like to see some more Destiny lore and mysteries just like it, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Anyway, I thank you very much for watching. My name's Evade, and I'll catch you Guardians in the next one.